It's the 3rd of September 2013. It's 10:55 in the morning, local time, Finland. And you're waiting off stage, just about to go on. What are you thinking? Well, you're thinking about what you've got to do is you've got to go out there, you've got to tell your employees, you've got to tell the assembled journalists, you've got to tell the entire world that the thing that has driven your business to be a brilliant global success, you're going to have to sell. You're going to have to go out and tell them that the thing that has powered your growth for the last 30 years, you're going to have to sell. And as you're sitting there off stage, there's a thought racing round your mind, something that you can't quite shake off, sort of like an itch that you can't quite scratch. And that thought is, you don't really understand why. Why are you having to sell? How has it got to this place? Now just take a moment, everybody here in the room, and just think about your own team. Think about your own business, and just imagine that was you and you were having to go out on stage and deliver that kind of message to people. That's pretty terrifying, isn't it, in terms of a message? Well, at 11 o'clock, Stephen Elop, CEO, walked out into the dazzling brightness of the lights of Nokia Global HQ and announced to a shocked world that they were selling their mobile phone business to Microsoft. But why? Why are you selling? To which he uttered his now famous quote, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. And that's because the world has changed fundamentally. The old ways no longer work. We see it all around us every single day. The fantastic global business that is Unilever nearly falling prey to a hostile takeover by 3G Capital earlier this year. The brilliant engineering and aerospace business that's Rolls-Royce registering a record loss of £4 billion. And when you read the papers and look on your news feeds, you will see it every single day, every single week. The businesses and the brands, the retailers that we grow up with, struggling to compete in this new world. And that's because the old ways no longer work. The top 700 multinational companies have lost 25% drop in their profits over the last 5 years. So top 700 big successful companies drop their profits by 25%. The old ways no longer work. Good afternoon, my name is Henry Tucker, Managing Director of Kantar Futures, part of WPP and the consultancy arm of Kantar, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. And for those that I don't know, what we do is we help our clients look ahead to the future marketplace and understand what are the dynamics of change that are going to be shaping your future marketplace. And then importantly, which of those dynamics do you need to pay attention to so you can make sure that you keep growing and that you keep creating value and you start to do some things different today, whether that's about strategy change, innovation, platforms, acquisitions. So we're helping people look forward, whether that's in the automotive industry, the pharmaceutical, the food and drink, technology businesses, look ahead so I can start to do something different today so I can profit from the change that's coming. And I love my job. I mean, it's the best job in the world, I think, doing this kind of stuff. But what's really struck me as remarkable over the last few years is how all of these different changes around us are starting to weave together and make a much bigger shift in the world that we live in. So that's societal change, cultural change, technology change, and you heard some fantastic stuff from the previous presentation, but it is radically reshaping the world that we're all trying to operate in. Now, just 5 years ago in 2012, most of you will probably remember this iconic image from the 2012 Olympics, Mo Farah winning the 5,000 meters. 2012 is not that long ago, 5 years ago. In 2012, after an event like this, if I wanted to get back into the city, I would have got a taxi. Today, anywhere around the world, I'm going to Uber it. Of course I am. So not only have we had a new global business that has fantastically grown globally, maybe done some other things that are a bit more problematic, fantastically grown globally and disrupted an entire industry, it's not just about business, it's entered our language and culture. It turns up in music now. It turns up in vocabulary around the world. In 2012, if I had said to my partner, we're going away this weekend, but when we're away, I'm going to invite some complete strangers that I've never met before to come and stay in our apartment, and don't worry, it'll be absolutely fine, she would have thought I was genuinely insane, and she may still do. But actually today, using Airbnb is not a risky decision. Actually, it's a smart use of the assets that I have. So in those 5 years, we've flipped in terms of what we think around trust around people. 5 years ago in the UK, same-sex marriage was illegal. Now, in the papers, the big debate is, should we have LGBTQ toilets? Are they appropriate or not in schools? In 2012, Isis was a concept car from Toyota. The world has changed remarkably around us, but sometimes we don't see the change because we're all living it day to day. But actually, when we speak to consumers right around the world, they're getting very used to this form of radical change. We've already got one embedded chip advocate you heard from earlier. Well, a couple of weeks ago in the US, a company called 3 Square Market, for 50 of their employees, embedded a chip between the thumb and the forefinger that lets them enter the building without having to do anything else with a card, lets them use vending machines to get snacks, the important things of life at work, lets them log on to their computer. But actually, this company in the US, they're late to the game. There's companies in Europe already been doing this. There's one train company up in Sweden that you can scan an embedded chip and it will link back to your credit cards and it's accepted as payment. The world is changing incredibly fast. And when we see that change all around us, the first thing you've got to accept, and the hard part is about getting your businesses to accept this, is there's no going back. Consumers, shoppers have changed fundamentally in their values and their attitudes, and we'll come back to that. But actually, importantly, how you build brands, how you drive growth, how you get to business success is fundamentally reshaping. So if ever there was a time for creativity, which is why I love the last presentation, that time is now. Creativity applied to how are we going to drive successful outcomes for society, people, planet, business going forward. And if there's one lesson that I've taken of the last few years of watching change around the world, it's to forsake incrementalism. Get rid of all these half measures. I bet you, if I asked you individually, you've all got things in your plans, personally, professionally, businesses, that they're small little innovations. They're that subtle line extension, that new campaign that's just a little bit different to what it was before. Now isn't the time for half ideas. Now is the time for doing something different, because we're heading into a new age, and for this new age, you need to radically throw up all your business and start to reconfigure it for a different age. And that age is the third age of consumption. The first age of consumption, this was from the mid-17th century all the way through to the mid-19th century. And this was an age about exploration and luxury for the few. So if you had the money, then this was the time when you could suddenly get these fantastic commodities like coffee, tea, chocolate, china plates. And if you were lucky enough to have the resources to get these kind of things, then actually not only did it improve and elevate the quality of your life, but it was also a really clear marker of status to other people out there in the consumption marketplace of who you were and what your place in society was. We then moved into the second age of consumption, and that was the age of machinery. That was the age of opening up, democratization of the marketplace. This was the age of mass manufacturing, all those big plants pumping out the same products to ship around the world. This was the age of department stores, opening up so everybody could see what was on offer. And it was also the rise of a new market around the world, and that market was middle-class consumers. And we're now in the third age of consumption, and it's been evolving for a few years now. But the definitive moment was the financial crisis of 2008. And what we start to see as we head deeper into the 21st century is that some of those foundational assumptions which big businesses and brands were built upon are starting to look that little bit shaky, and all of these new companies, new experiences are coming up, and they don't seem to square. And that's because they're resolving different challenges. And the greatest challenge in the third age of consumption is the challenge of capacity. And capacity is pushing the global marketplace in a new direction. It's not about constraint and restriction. It's just acting as a bit of a regulator, a brake on consumers and business alike. So that's where the creative challenges for the third age of consumption is around the challenges of capacity. And how can I build successful brands and businesses? Well, the way I do that in the third age of consumption is, first of all, understanding the different forms of capacity, and then understanding how to react to them. And that's what we're going to look at over the next few minutes together. There are three main forms of capacity challenge at the moment. The first is cognitive capacity. This is the rise of technology, but also the overloading of information on us as human beings around the world. The second is economic capacity, the slowing down of global economic growth rates around the world. And the third is resource capacity. This is about, are we reaching the boundaries, the limits of this planet? And is it then shaping environmental attitudes, but importantly, lifestyle, values, and behaviors? So let's just have a think about each in turn. The first, cognitive capacity. Actually, the overload of information we get every single day, we're still the same basic biological things, and we're sort of bounded by that. And if you look at data from the US, you have that 7-fold increase in the amount of gigabytes of information that consumers are exposed to every day. 74 gigabytes a day. You get a third of consumers saying, when I see advertising, I avert my eyes. A quarter of consumers have downloaded ad blocking software. These are responses to this cognitive capacity constraint. I need to control it to live my life. That combines with economic capacity. Now, productivity rates, and I'm not going to do an economics 101 here, but we'll just keep it quite light for Friday. Economic capacity, when you look at productivity rates, they remain stubbornly low around the world. And if you made the generous assumption that productivity rates in the next 50 years are going to grow at the same rate as in the last 50 years, because population growth rates are declining, that equates to a 40% drop in global GDP. A 40% drop. That's a massive impact on any marketplace out there. And if you just want to keep that flat and avoid that drop, then productivity rates need to grow 80% faster than at any time in the past. And resource capacity. There are 9 planetary boundaries defined by the Stockholm Institute. And it's been proven that we've breached 4 of them already. Climate change is one. And as we breach these boundaries, it puts pressure on resources around the world. And we see the biosphere, another one of the planetary boundaries, really taking the brunt of this at the moment, and 60% of all species have disappeared in the last 50 years. And when you put all of these forms of capacity constraint together, you get to a new challenge. And the new challenge is one that businesses and brands today have not been built and trained in. How do I find growth in the context of capacity? That's a good problem to apply all of the creative brains in this room to. What can I do in this new context of capacity to find growth? Well, the first thing to do is say, well, modern businesses and brands were built in that second age of consumption. They were built on the assumption of unlimited resources and booming populations. Those two no longer exist. But we can start to see in the third age of consumption a new way to think about creating value for consumers and shoppers. And if there was an acronym that described it, it would be one of a new era, ERA. Experiences, relationships, and algorithms. So we speak to consumers right around the world. We have proprietary data in 24 markets and trend spotters in about 300 cities. And one of the things that we see is that people are really prioritizing experiences over material possessions. And we're seeing the increasing amount of the disconnection between the experience and the product. This is the ride without the car. This is the streaming of music without owning the CD or the vinyl. So actually, from a consumer point of view, I still want to be absolutely experience rich. But in this era of constraint, actually, I'm quite happy to be ownership poor. Actually, I'm more than happy to be ownership poor. I want to be experience rich, and I want to be ownership poor because that's a smart way to use my resources to get around. And we'll see this continue in the third age of consumption, and then you get a shift. And the shift is that the value becomes in the experience rather than possession of a product over time. When we think about relationships, absolutely pivotal to us as humankind. They're not going to change. We still want to spend time with people rather than spend time with things. So that continues to be a defining part of how to connect with the marketplace. And whatever that connection means, whether that's face-to-face, virtual, social media, it doesn't really matter. Relationships are still a core part of any value equation you need to build. And algorithms. People are starting to see the value in algorithms because actually algorithms are how I want to relate to the marketplace. That's what I want from brands. Because at the core, I want the best value I can get, but with the minimal expenditure of time, effort, attention, headspace. It's all too boring and hard work to make choices. If you can help me get to the experiences I want with the least amount of effort, that is a fantastic result. And algorithms will continue to change the relationship between consumers and brands as they start to do more with the data to maximize consumer experiences rather than, as we are today, to boost the visibility of particular brands. So when we think about this new era, we can start to see if I'm building a business today or reshaping my current business and my brands and my comms for tomorrow, I need to think about a new value proposition. And that value proposition has got to be about experiences, relationships, and algorithms at its core. Because when you think about experiences, this is about managing the emotional value of what you do for consumers. It's not about making a product, it's about managing that emotional value. And relationships are different from making a sale. It's more of a long-term thinking rather than a short-term view. So how can we think more around a lifetime value rather than a transactional exchange? And algorithms is about managing speed. Get me to the value, get me to the product that I want with the minimum fuss. So I have to pay so little attention to what you're telling me because honestly, I don't care. I want to get to that experience that helps me rather than have to go through all this information because I have way too much in my life already. And that's the new value equation we've got to think of. And actually, consumers are already ahead of business in this regard. And we've seen that that second age of consumption, of no limits, is already giving way to a more mindful world, a more lightweight world, where consumers want to live large, absolutely, but they want to carry little. And that's the consumer you've got to engage with, the one that wants to live large and carry little. I still want to have the best experiences on the planet, of course I do. I just don't want all the baggage that came before of having stuff cluttering up my life. I want all the convenience, enrichment, and speed of stuff, brilliant experiences, but I don't want the accumulation, the possession, and the debt. And we'll see as we head into the third age of consumption that increasing disconnection between the product and the experience, and the value is over here. And that is absolutely why you need to stop doing incremental ideas. You need to go back and look at what you're doing and challenge yourself to do bigger things. Because the pace of this change, we're seeing it already, it is only going to accelerate. And one of the reasons it's going to continue to accelerate is the impact of younger generations coming to the marketplace. Many businesses, if they're being open, and many brands will be very clear that we struggled a bit with the millennial generation, not to connect with them per se, but actually to get the same value out of them that we did with previous generations. Well, just wait till the centennial generation, the generation rushing up behind them, come on the marketplace. The context they're growing up in is fundamentally different. So the centennial generation, it's a third of the population on the planet, and by 2025, 45% of them will be 20 plus, which means spending independently and core to your workforce as well. So if you haven't worked out how to create value for these guys, you're going to get left behind incredibly quickly. Let's take a moment and just go back to music that I mentioned earlier. I think it's a really good industry to look at because it's the first that has been wholly disrupted by the digital and capacity constraints of the third age of consumption. And we've seen that complete decoupling of ownership from experience. So music as a product versus music as a service. And that experience is placed firmly in the heart of an ecosystem of social relationships driven by algorithms to get you the bands, the musics, the genre that you most want. So actually we can already see this disrupting the marketplace out there in a relatively short period of time. And if you want to find out more about this, either ask me afterwards. If you go onto our website or look up Kantar Futures on podcasts, you'll see we've got 4 lessons you can learn, 4 music lessons you can learn from the disruption of this industry. It's a great read or listen depending what you want to do. So what's the lesson here? I think the lesson is you cannot blunt the momentum of change. You can't blunt the momentum of the third age of consumption. You can't blunt the momentum of disruptive competitors. What you need to do is to make bolder bets. Make bolder bets, like Volvo, who in July this year announced that in 2019 they are going to stop selling all gas and diesel-powered cars. That's just 2 years away. Now that is a bold, aggressive bet. Make a bolder bet like Unilever buying Dollar Shave Club, as much to disrupt themselves by acquiring a fundamentally different type of business model to anything they've ever done in the past, as to actually disrupt and try and change themselves in the category against Gillette and the others out there. You need to make bolder bets, like Amazon buying Whole Foods. So the third age of consumption is firmly here. The old ways will no longer work. Incremental thinking is absolutely the wrong time to do. And in line with the previous speaker, creativity is the thing that's going to solve it. But creativity has to have a focus. And that focus is think about people. Think about consumers. Think about shoppers. Think about families. Think about individuals. And think about a new value equation around experiences, relationships, and algorithms. And then you can make some bigger, bolder bets more confidently. I happen to know where you're all going to be 18 months from now. You're going to be standing just off stage, about to go on and talk at a press conference. The only thing that I want to know, though, is what is the story that you are going to tell? Is it going to be a story about how you've fully embraced the third age of consumption, you've disrupted your own business, you've disrupted the marketplace out there, you've created new value and you've accelerated growth? Or is the story, no matter what you say to people out there, is that story only going to be remembered by the headline the next day, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost"? Thank you very much.